We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. If you could let me know that you can hear me, that would be great, so we can fix it if somebody is unable to hear me. Thank you so much. Excellent. So Sue, no, you're not supposed to be able to speak because I guess there were some complications with that. The way that the participants are interacting is through the chat feature. So according to the clock on the computer, it's 4 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Szwabowski. I'm the instructional specialist for world languages in Chesterfield County. And today our topic is about mentorships, paying it forward, specifically informal mentorships, not the ones that are assigned to school divisions. But if you are serving in that capacity right now, hopefully you'll also walk away with some tips of the trade that can help you. One of the things that you need to know is that a lot of the things you'll hear today about developing those relationships are things that have crossover in things you're already doing. Some of you may serve as clinical faculty. Some of you perhaps have served in the role of coach or mentor for somebody in your school division. And some of you may have led PLCs or professional learning communities. A lot of the things that we do when we're mentoring somebody are common to all of those types of interactions because really at the heart of them, they're about relationship building. They're about letting people know what their strengths are and helping them to find them, build on those strengths, hold them accountable when it's time to help them to grow, and encourage them so that they can be the very best teachers that they can be. I have served as a mentor and or an instructional coach for 28 years. I didn't think about that until we were preparing for today. And I realized that makes me very, very old because I was one of the first instructional coaches in the school division where I was working back in 1988 and 89. So after 1 year in the classroom, I was asked to serve as an instructional coach and given a day of training, and off we went. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it, but that's the way that we were doing it as instructional coaching first came into practice. My role that I have now as the instructional specialist for world languages is the reason that I learned how to do instructional coaching, which is a little bit different. What I saw is that beginning in about 2009 and 10 in particular for Chesterfield County, that I saw more and more provisionally licensed teachers entering the field. Part of that had to do with the fact that a nearby university had canceled its teacher prep program for world languages, so people were graduating, they had their degrees, but they didn't have any teacher preparation and they still wanted to be teachers. Another piece of it is just that if you look at the statistics in general across the country, not only in world languages but in other content areas, world languages, science, math, the critical shortage areas, more and more people are considering teaching as a career after they've already set off on the path and perhaps their university doesn't have a teacher prep program, or perhaps it's too late to start all over without changing their major. Whatever the reason, we were seeing a lot more people who were provisionally licensed and needed additional support. We're blessed that our school division has a connection with Virginia Commonwealth University, and so they have what's called the Santa Cruz program. We had Santa Cruz coaches in the schools, but they weren't world language specific. So I begged, and was allowed to get some clinical faculty training, and from there, the job just kind of grew. I'm blessed that I have the type of job where you have some direction that you can give to it. What I had to leave behind once I became an instructional coach was an implicit bias I realized, against people who hadn't had that traditional teacher prep path. I didn't even realize that I had that bias, so I had to work very hard on that. And I had to learn several things too. One of them was that I had to learn to be patient, to help people when they were working through things, because it's my instinct to just solve things. Well, that's not going to help them be better teachers necessarily, because I won't always be standing next to them. I had to learn mentoring skills, and I had to learn instructional coaching skills, and I still had to work on my listening skills as well. The final thing is that I had to become aware of what's known as growth mindset. Thankfully, I was always predisposed to the idea of people having a growth mindset as opposed to fixed growth. And so I was blessed with that idea, but I didn't have a word for it until I began the teaching. So what I would like you to do now, and we'll be doing this a few times during our hour together, is I would like you to share what you're hoping to learn. If you could type it in via chat, so that I can try to make sure that I address everybody's needs. And I think that everybody has now joined our conversation, so this is a great time for me to thank the tech team at Washington and Lee for making this a success. They worked with me for an hour yesterday to make sure that you could see the video, that you could hear things. So a big shout out to the technology team at Washington and Lee for making this happen. Think about what you want to learn, and we'll give you a little bit of time. How best to help someone when they feel like they're overwhelmed and don't know where to start. So with that one, sometimes by leading them through some questioning, you can help them do their priorities. We're going to be doing a little bit of practice with open-ended stems today. Remember, this is really just an overview of what you might need to be a fully developed mentor. And I have a number of resources that I'll be sharing with you at the end of the presentation so that you can feel like you have plenty of things to dig through. You also have my contact information, so you can give me a shout out or a call if need be so that you can be successful, because I applaud all of you for being interested in being mentors. Looks like all of you are typing at once. Well, Bobby says that he's happy to keep abreast of the research, and he's a very good resource for all of us to have. Oh, no, that was Sue. Sorry. Support colleagues who are new to teaching, especially if they're struggling with the various coaches. Get a strong foundation to advise my colleagues. Classroom management. One of the nicest tools that you can use for that, if your school division doesn't have a very strong induction program, or even if they do, the tools for the classroom is something that seems to have a lot of solid suggestions for the teachers. It's very clear. Sorry if I don't move. I don't move in this room often enough to make the lights go back on. So about every 10 minutes or so you'll see me do that, and don't worry about that. It doesn't mean that I'm leaving you, it just means that I had to get the lights to go back on in the room. And Bobby wants to know about the suggested ground rules for those of us in FLAVA working with mentees and protégés. I don't know all of the conversation that went on April 29th because I wasn't able to attend the spring conference. But in general, I would say make sure that you keep a running document of your meetings, make sure that you set your agendas, that you hold one another accountable, that you step back from time to time and see what's working and what doesn't, and keep a log of your hours so that if your school division is able to give you some recertification points, you have backup. Don't only just keep the dates and the times, but have a product that you can point to, whether it be what your conversation was, specifics as to what you discussed, what were the outcomes. If you work with a collaborative log, that can be a good product to show what you did. And Diana Arasso says that she'd like to learn collaboration techniques. I'm wondering if you could clarify what you mean by that, Diana. I'm hoping that I understand what you want, but I just want to make sure. Oh, best techniques for collaboration. So we'll actually be addressing that during the course of this hour, and please feel free to contact me if we don't answer your question by the end of the hour, because I'm happy to share. We talked already about the road less taken, which is essentially how I got to be here. And so my question to you is, why did you step forward to become a mentor? If you could share by typing in your reasons for being a mentor. And we'll probably be doing this a couple more times so that you know. And I'm apologizing for not being able to give you chocolate because that's rule number one of PD is that you always have chocolate for the teachers, but it's just not possible today. The only teacher to do it with 2 new teachers. Been there. But thank you for doing it, because it's such an important thing to help and support new teachers. They aren't going to survive easily without us. I have some pay it forwards. Somebody who didn't have that opportunity. Someone whose mentor was extremely helpful. Provisionally licensed career switcher. And by the way, some of my best teachers, as it turns out, were provisionally licensed career switchers. I think it has to do with having a passion for the students, having a passion for your content, and really wanting to share both learning along the way, becoming a lifelong learner, knowing nobody's perfect. And the minute that you stop learning, and the year that you can say, I didn't learn anything this year, it's probably the year that you might want to say, well, I guess it's time for me to go. Perhaps not, but that's what I've been told by an awful lot of experienced teachers. So I wanted to share just a little bit of background with you so that you know where we are among the states. There are, as you can see, 29 states that require some kind of new teacher induction, which means then that there are 21 that don't have it. Thankfully, Virginia is among the school divisions where there is some kind of teacher induction. In fact, Virginia requires 1 year. So it kind of falls mid-range when you look at what the 29 states offer. There are some states where no specific time is required, and there are some states where it's more than 2 years. We require 1 year of formal induction. So that means something that is provided by the school division. One of the good things I can share with you about the Commonwealth of Virginia is that every school division in the Commonwealth of Virginia has been provided funds by the legislature so that they can have formal teacher induction programs. So it's 1 year, which is not enough. We know the huge growth that happens the first 3 to 5 years, but at least it's a year that's in place. So for, I think, most of you, you are probably not participating as the formal mentor for a person from your school division. It sounds like most of you are reaching out across boundaries, but no matter what your state, know that what we're really talking about with this with FLAVA, it's an informal mentor. Pretty much your role might be a lot the same, but it isn't going to be quite the same in that you don't have to attend as many meetings, although we want to make sure that we have the support that you need. Another thing that you need to know is that in Virginia, yes, we require that everybody who's in a public school division get that year-long induction or mentoring the first year. But you may not be mentoring somebody who is in the same content area as you are. And so a person could theoretically be paired with a science teacher or a math teacher or somebody whose expertise is not in developing language skills as much. They'll have a lot of support that they can provide in terms of what are the expectations for the schools, what are the rules, what are the policies, what are the general pieces of good teaching, instructional planning, where to find the sources so that you can have a deep knowledge of content. What does it mean to have a tight lesson plan and have it aligned with the curriculum and the instruction and the assessment, so that when people go through the improvement cycle where they identify a need and they try to improve their practice and they do debriefing, so that all of those pieces are common, no matter what your subject area. But the little things that having a language mentor can provide to somebody in either a smaller school division or someone who just doesn't have that, those things are invaluable. If you're asked to mentor somebody whose language expertise is different than your own. For example, you're a French teacher and you want to mentor somebody who happens to be a Latin teacher. One of the additional supports I would suggest to you is that you contact with your mentee, contact your professional state organizations. So we call them by their nickname AATs, but for example, the Classical Association of Virginia, or CAV, that is the acronym for Latin teachers. So if you're outside of your content area, then meaning French to German, etc., not just world languages in general, please take a look at what you can, the resources that can be provided to you from the professional organizations in the state. Keisha commented that it would be much better to be paired by content area, and I agree 100%. But it's my understanding that at times that may or may not happen. So I agree though, 100%. It's so nice because I can just point somebody to 15 resources if they're trying to try something new with open resources, and they don't want to spend 15 hours delving through and coming up with only 1 or 2 activities. Because if you've already done those things, why wouldn't you share that expertise with someone else? Or how you might want to teach a particular communicative strategy, etc. So I'm in 100% agreement with you, Keisha. Yes, it's so nice if we can be paired by content area. We also kind of talked about that opportunity to connect beyond boundaries, because different areas of the Commonwealth have different ways of doing things. Both of you can learn. One thing I want to say to you as mentors is that this isn't a one-sided partnership where you're doing all of the teaching and they're doing all of the learning. In that opportunity to use reflective practices and to model them for the person who is your mentee, I'm hoping that all of you will have an opportunity to improve your own practice as well. And I always say it's fun to get to know another word nerd, because that's what we all are. And we love the turn of a phrase. We love to see how languages connect to one another. And it's so much fun to be with other people who have those same interests. So this is another time when I'm going to ask you to stop and reflect. And I know that a couple of you noted that you didn't have a formal mentor. Perhaps you had an informal mentor, a department chair, or another person in your life who helped guide you through the dangerous shoals of that first year of teaching, which can be so scary. I'm going to ask you to think about what your own mentor, formal or informal, or influential teacher in your life gave you, and then share a piece of advice or a strategy that that person passed on to you that you think is a worthwhile piece of advice to give new and struggling teachers. And we'll take about a minute to do that, but if you need more time, please let me know. Strategies to coordinate. It's nice to see some of the things that you mentioned, whether it be showing you where the tools and resources are that you need to be successful, being there to support somebody as they are going through the process. Relationships are key for language learning. No kidding. And that's really what it's all about. And so you'll see that we're going to spend a fair amount of our time today and in this beginning session talking about relationship building, because that's what it's all about. Oh, being a teacher in a student-centered classroom, beautiful. So that was Bobby who said that. Nice. And it really, that shift, when you talk about that shift that Bobby talks about, moving from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom, that means that as somebody gave him the confidence and the safe space that he needed so that he could do those challenges. That's exactly right. A paradigm shift in thought and practice. And so that's part of what you're going to be helping people do, is change their practice. Too often when young teachers are entering our profession, they've had a chance to learn what the most current methods are. They understand what the best practice is. They go into student teaching. They do their very best with it. And then depending on where they are, it can be that either there's not enough support or not enough people who are invested in that way of teaching, and they'll fall back on their own practice. So giving people a safe space where they can try new things and letting them know that it's okay to fail forward. One of you mentioned reflecting. I think it was Keisha mentioned reflecting on your practice in your lesson plans so that you know how you're going to do it better the next time. A lot of good input from everybody. Thank you. Differentiating is huge, no matter what the special populations might be. And so I agree with you on that one. There's a challenge of being an informal mentor that I want to talk to you about. For most of you, perhaps not Patrick, because it sounds like maybe his 2 new teachers are in his school or right nearby. But for some of you, you might be doing some distance mentoring and you might not be in the same physical location. So when you're trying to model what a piece of good teaching is, how are you going to help them by making your thinking visible? How are you going to help them through the thought process so that they know what it is that they want to express? We can use clarifying questions. In fact, I used one a little bit earlier with somebody. I said, I can't remember, I think it might have been Diana. Tell me what you mean by that so that I can make sure I'm answering the question I'm intrigued by. That interests me. Can you tell me a little bit more? And when you can draw out a response, when you can elicit what their thought process is, you can actually help them improve their practice too. So if you have your mentee write it, think it, talk about whatever it is, the strategy, that communication piece is actually going to help them be better at communicating in general and help improve their practice. I also talk a little bit about making your thinking visible. And then I realized that as I saw everybody coming in, that most of you are in the 612 world. And I'm not sure if you're used to talking about visible thinking. Is that something that's familiar to most of you? So so for some of you it's no. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, just a little bit. Visible thinking is a key phrase that was used with Harvard's Visible Thinking, their Project Zero. And it's something that you see a lot in elementary grades and some middle school grades in different content areas, including French and Spanish and Mandarin here in Chesterfield. It's when you talk about your thought process as the adult in the room so that you can help the students wrap their heads around the thinking. It might be done a little bit differently in the secondary arena. For example, you might use the question formulation technique that is out of Massachusetts. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, you might be able to do a little bit of research on QFT, or question formulation technique. There is a green book, and I think it has a red bird cage on it. It might be called Asking Just the Right Question. That is something that you can largely guide yourself through on the process. It's really making questions, learning how to make good questions, and revising those questions so that they come to higher level thinking. To return to the visible thinking, I'll make sure that I send that address out to you. And when I make this PowerPoint presentation available to you, I'll add it into the resources. But it's visiblethinkingpz.org. And you'll find a lot of resources that can help you with some strategies. My suggestion would be to you to try one or two, work on them until you can do them pretty well, and then grow. But you're going to find that a lot of the things that are there are things you're already doing. When I first stumbled upon the site, I thought, oh, we're doing this. I just didn't know there was a name for it. And that happens a lot in teaching. What are some of the other things that complicate the task of working with adult learners? If you could weigh in on that. We know that they need different motivation. They need a reason for wanting to learn. But what are some other challenges that you are either having or that you're worried that you might have as you work with adult learners? It doesn't look like, oh, we've got some people typing, good. They want practical options and techniques. Yes, they want things that they can take back and use tomorrow. They want things that they know are going to work. And if you're going to say research-based practice, for some people, it's very helpful if they know whose research and has it been vetted and has it been replicated, or is it just the latest fad and technique that everybody's doing? Is it the latest fidget spinner, to use this week's fad in the classrooms? Oh, so we have a couple of things that are really interesting topics. So we have somebody who said working with difficult people, making constructive criticism without, working with coaching difficult people who still need to be mentored. How do you win them? That's actually the next slide, so it's pretty ironic that you said that. But we'll jump ahead on that one, because making sure that you stay professional, but sometimes you need to start a little more slowly. And this can be a challenging part of mentoring, because anytime I've gone into the classroom of a novice teacher, and even some of the teachers who have been around for a while, probably within 5 to 10 minutes, because I've been doing it a while maybe, I'll have enough information on the script that I tend to take to probably have a good 30-minute conversation. Because by the time you let the teacher lead the conversation, and sometimes you're doing a little bit of guiding, but it has to be subtle, because it has to be something that they want to improve their practice in. You're drawing them out, and you're helping them think, and you're modeling visible thinking, like, how might it look if? Can you tell me about why you made the decision to use this strategy to approach this? Those things take time. And initially, some of those open-ended stems don't sound natural. So we'll be practicing with a few of them in a little bit, but I limited it to 3 or 4 for the different hypothetical situations I'm giving you. But you'll have access to more stems in the resources that you'll be given. Bobby just commented, a lot of times we teach the way we were taught. and how we wish we'd been taught, or how we teach ourselves to learn. I see a lot of times in the classroom that teachers will fall back on what they saw when they were students themselves. So they may have gone to school, and the school may have modeled wonderful best practices, but if it's not something they really became adept at using, they will fall back on their old habits. It's kind of like me with my diet. I say, got to constantly work on that one. I don't want to skip over Keisha's comment about bias and deficit thinking. And I talked a little bit about growth mindset. But absolutely, working both for the teacher and the students, admitting that you have implicit bias and recognizing it and changing your mindset. And instead of working from what the students can't do or the mentee can't do, work from your strengths. Because nobody went into this profession saying, oh, I think I'll be a mediocre teacher today. That's not what we're about. We came into this profession and we stayed in this profession because we love students. We have a passion for our content area. We want to help improve the world, a lot of us, and we like to share our learning. So Keisha's comment about bias and deficit thinking is true both for the students and for the new teacher or the mentee that you're working with. I think we got everybody. Patrick, I know you wanted to talk about differentiating instruction, and that's a whole class, several sessions. I can tell you that there's a book out by Deborah Blaz, the Differentiation Strategies for the Foreign Language Classroom, I think it's called. If you love the background matter, as I do, you'll really like reading chapters 1 through 4. If you're impatient and you just want to get to help me now, chapter 5 is a smorgasbord of ideas. There's also a wiki about differentiation, and I will try to remember to share that, and I can add it to the references. There's a really good wiki space that talks about differentiation in a world language classroom, and I think that would be a good resource for you too. So we said we were going to talk about challenging conversations. How do you deal with somebody who isn't willing to let themselves be open to growing? It's a tough one. One of the best things that you can do, or at least one of the best things that's worked for me, I'm not trying to say it's going to work for everybody, is to put the evidence at the forefront. And by that, I mean when you're in a classroom, if you have that chance, or if you don't, but the mentee has perhaps another person who's mentoring them, and you look at a scripting tool that says that this is what was going on in the classroom, take it back to some of our resources that we have that are specific to world language. So whether you're talking about Project TEL, the ECFL Proficiency Guidelines, can-do statements, which are put out by ECFL and the CESFL, or the VDOE's wonderful document on implementing the standards of learning in the foreign language classroom. Go back to this isn't you versus that person. It's here's the evidence that we see in the classroom right now. Select a tool that you think is going to help for the moment, so that it's no longer you saying that they're not doing what they need to do, or that they're being less than a strong teacher. It helps when you can fall back on research and best practices. So I think that probably based on, I know almost everybody who's in the webinar today, at least a little bit. And for most of you, I would think that you have a pretty good familiarity with Project TEL, the ECFL Proficiency Guidelines, the can-do statements, maybe less familiar. Those just came out in 2015. Same thing with the VDOE document. With regard to the VDOE document, the front matter, the first 24, 26 pages talk a lot about best practices. If you can fall back on those things, I think that can help let the person feel more comfortable. But when we talked about going slow in the beginning to establish a relationship, I was referring to getting the person to the place where they feel comfortable. Because if they don't feel comfortable, if they have their walls up, then you're not going to make a lot of progress. And that can be frustrating. Because after all, you're volunteering your time, you want to help them, and sometimes you know darn well within a few minutes what needs to be done in there. So helping that person get to the point where it's their decision to make a change, their decision to grow, can take a lot of coaxing, which is why sometimes it's best to start with the things that are surface changes. Unless a student is in danger or you see some serious academic issues, start small sometimes. I know that is not what you probably want to hear, but it's a way to build trust. And we're going to be looking at a variation on a collaborative log in a little bit that will perhaps be something that you can share with them. So I'm going to skip to the next. See, yeah, I swear, I was thinking about you all. A few stems for those challenging conversations. There are a lot of them I'll be sharing with you with the resources at the end, but for now, let's just look at these. So here's the hypothetical, and I'll read it to you at the beginning, then we'll look at the stems, I'll read it again, and I'll ask you to type your input. Your mentee has just been observed by an administrator. During the course of the 20-minute observation, the listening portion of the lesson plan did not queue up correctly, so 2 students went off task, and 3 students in the back of the classroom who did not understand the communication goal were confused about an activity. You know that this person has their defenses up, and you want to start that conversation about something that might be changed. So looking at these stems, what might happen if, how did it affect you when, what are the criteria you use to, or what might you do differently next class? So an administrator was in their room for 20 minutes, the listening activity didn't queue up, 2 students were off task for that, 3 students in the back were not paying attention because they didn't understand the directions. So practice making a question with one of these stems while I wave my arms around and look silly so I can get the lights back on, and then we'll share out. Thanks. So Diana wrote, how did it affect you when the technology stopped? So she isolated one piece of the 20-minute observation, and she started with something that is a good, safer place to start, because if you're a world language teacher, all of us have been at that situation at one time or another. So Jennifer Thomas wrote, what are the criteria you could use to better explain the task? And she's already thinking about where she's going to guide the person. I'm thinking of applying can-do statements if the teacher did not use them. And my students respond well to them. When you can bring things back to research base, then it's not personal. And that's a challenge when somebody has their walls up and they're not feeling comfortable or safe about working in a collaborative nature. What do you feel were your stronger points delivering your instruction? Marisol, that's great because you're starting them from a safe place. What did you do well? And so your stronger points delivering your instruction, and you can then tie it even back to perhaps their instructional planning. But you're really beginning that coaching cycle where you identify something that could be improved in the lesson, improved in their practice, and then you help them learn from it during that observation cycle, and then you debrief. Keisha has, what might happen if you implemented wait time transitions to use during technological difficulties? Wait time is something that's really hard for a lot of people to learn how to do. It's a good thing to practice, just like these questions are today. And really, we're just scratching the surface with them. Okay, I don't know if anybody else has anything, so we'll go ahead to the next piece. This is really what it boils down to. You have to have mutual respect for one another, and it takes time. And some people we are going to relate to more easily than others, and that's just the nature of personalities. But to know that you are going to approach one another from that idea of what do you do well, or your growth mindset, not from the deficits. Don't concentrate as much on the deficits, which is something that we're targeted to do in our red pen kind of mentality that we grew up in. So that's really what it boils down to. One of the other pieces that I saw a lot when I was researching for today, and it helped me review, was the importance of establishing your protocols. Meet on a regular basis to collaborate and to build on your relationship. If you're nearby, face-to-face is wonderful. It does not have to be a long time, but that's why I put meet in quotations, because it could be a phone call. It could be Google Chat or Skyping if distance is something that can affect you. But building on that relationship and even doing some things, even though I say stay professional, even doing some things that are social in nature so that you can see one another in a different light. When you're building on your relationship, you also need to think about how you're going to create a coaching plan with them. If they're in Patrick's situation, he probably has some kind of coaching plan with the people because he's in more formal mentorship. But you might want to, if you're in a less formal relationship, either begin with that document if you feel comfortable, but I would almost say be careful not to step on that mentor's toes, or even better yet, think about something that is world language specific, referring back to Project TEL, the ACTFL proficiency guidelines, the can-do statements, the VDOEs implementing the SOLs in the foreign language classroom. Each one of those documents could be a semester-long course at college. There's just a wealth of knowledge that has gone into them. So perhaps when you're creating a coaching plan for your person, of course, they're leading the way, you can do the guiding, help them think about where they want to grow and take one piece of the TEL or one piece of the ACTFL proficiency guidelines and work it with them, make it one thing or only two things, no more than that, so that they can really become proficient. So, Keisha, you're funny. It may be helpful to share your teaching testimony. I know. It's always good to be the expert in the room for one brief moment, because usually I'm not the expert in the room. So, another thing that I want to remind you is that if you don't have a coaching plan, or whatever you want to call it, individualized learning plan, a goal, then you're not going to know when you got there. So even though it can be hard to set a goal or multiple goals to get you somewhere along the way, it's a really important piece of what you do together. And it's important that it comes from the person who's being mentored by you, because as Bobby alluded to earlier, the motivation of adult learners can be a little different. And if they don't own it, they're not going to follow through on it when you're not around. This is not news to any of us. In fact, those of you who have been involved in a PLC or any kind of coaching kind of situation before, you're probably starting to say, wait a minute, relationship building, listening skills, giving somebody a safe space where they can vent, where they know you're not going to go back and tell anybody, holding them accountable by creating goals. Those are all things that we do when we collaborate. And so it really boils down to all those things. And the thing with listening is that it requires that you wait before you provide suggestions. So that can be hard, because if you can walk into a room or you can walk into a situation and you've been there or you've seen other people there and you want to save somebody the pain of going through something negative, you want to jump in and help them. We're teachers. But waiting is key to what we do. And so when we are listening to them intently, you might want to parrot back what you think you heard them say to make sure that you're really understanding. You say, what I heard you say was, I think I hear, I'm hearing a lot of things. As I listen to you, I hear you telling me this. Is that correct? These are all open-ended stems that you could use to begin that conversation. So I can tell you personally that sometimes it's hard to wait, because I've seen a lot of things. I'm either well experienced or really old, depending on your perspective. And so waiting and making sure that I ask those listening questions to this day is something that I have to consciously tell myself to do. But you can't give good direction if you're asked when you don't know the route that the people want to take. So, and the tricky part is being a mentor is that it's kind of less direct. You're not like the GPS where it tells them exactly which way they need to take. They need to help, they need to decide where is it they want to go as professionals. So that's why this listening piece is so important. So I'm going to give you another practice with a hypothetical, and I want to thank all of you who did it, who responded to the hypothetical open-ended stem the last time. It says from Marisol, one aspect about Loudoun County is that a mentor has narrowed the key aspects of mentorship. So what I think I hear you saying is that mentor and the mentee keep focus on the important pieces. Yes. So you're going to use one of the stems that you see in front of you. In other words, what I'm hearing then, what I think you're saying is, if I understand correctly, you're saying, let me see if I understand. And obviously, if you can paraphrase these a little, but the point is that you're validating what it is that you heard from the person. You're verifying that what you heard was correct, because sometimes the message wasn't delivered in the same way that you thought you heard it. And you're clarifying what it is as well so that you can move to the next state. So here's your hypothetical. Your mentee is frustrated by a level 1 student who won't speak the target language in class. And she's tried paired practice, call response. She's had the students record answers privately with Google Voice. She's divided the class in two to have them do like a call response on the dialogue, keeping in mind this is level 1. Nothing will get the child to open up her mouth in class. So the frustration level is running pretty high with her because she needs to assess how well the student speaks as a novice level speaker. So if you could go ahead and use one of the open-ended stems you see on the screen or a similar one to clarify what it is you heard her talking about. In other words, you need additional strategies to encourage use of target language in class. That's nice. If I understand correctly, you're saying that the student feels uncomfortable speaking the language. Have you asked her why she feels that way? Very sensitive. And with regard to Keisha's prompt, you might be able to brainstorm some other things that will keep the person feeling safe. And that will get her maybe using language a little bit, just talking to one person that she feels safe talking to. Have you tried to approach the student in a more private setting? That's exactly where I was going with that, Marisol. We have just a couple more responses coming in. Let's see. If I understand the situation, you need to find some other strategies to help the student open up. Have you tried meeting with her outside of class time to talk with her about jumping? It looks like you have a good feel for how to do these. And I know that these question techniques can feel awkward in the beginning. That's one of the reasons that I wanted you to practice them a little today. It's not going to make you an expert on them, but perhaps it will give you some time to reflect as well, because you can use these coaching stems with your students when you're giving them feedback on what it is that they're doing in class. So to clarify, you create that coaching goal together, making sure that you hold them accountable, and you prioritize, because the best novice teacher in the world is still going to have more than one thing that you can work on to improve their practice, because they're so new to all of this. And as I think it was Mary Jo said earlier, they're just overwhelmed with everything. So what is going to give them the most bang for the buck to improve their practice in the world language classroom? The last tool that I wanted to share with you today is a way to guide the reflection. And this is adapted from the Santa Cruz model for coaching. They have nice resources if you have that opportunity to take a look at it later. If you are lucky enough to be near a college or university that has training for clinical faculty. You might beg, borrow, or steal your way in so that you can get some more formalized training on the structures, whether it be Santa Cruz or gym night, and impact on the coaching. That is something that's used in a lot of schools as well. But you guide your reflection. And again, just like before when we were talking about having the resources be the expert and not you telling them what to do, the structure that you use to guide the reflection can help make things end in a more positive vein, especially if you're dealing with a time when things didn't go well. So as you guide the reflection, you start out in the top left box, and it's teacher-led. So you ask them what were 3 things that went well. Whether it's something you actually observed, which would be preferable, or if it's something that they're relating to you. And it can be it can be really small when they've had a bad day. So it could be that the listening exercise queued up right, or the students all came in and they had their homework, or students were able to complete the activity, the communication activity, with very little prompting. And only one thing, when you move to the next box, one thing to change. That's hard because people tend to be negative about themselves. So you limit them to one thing. And if you can, do a little bit of guiding to the thing that's going to be the most bang for the buck, but more than once, the person has chosen something that is not what I think is going to implement the most change. And I've had to honor it, because I know that mentoring is not a one-and-done relationship. This is something that we're going to be doing through the year. And if what I saw in my observation is something that is truly critical, then it's going to come up again. Now, if it were something that were bordering on something serious, of course, we would need to address it, and that's outside of this model. Reflecting back on the one thing to change, the teacher gets 1 to 3 next steps for their homework. It could be as simple as go investigate the wiki space on differentiated instruction. And your next steps would include making sure that you have your next meeting time and probably giving them some resources to explore too. Because as independent learners, you're giving them that opportunity to explore on their own, but you're also giving them some framework. So keep in mind that there are other ways that you can guide the reflection as well. This is just one that's worked for me. When you celebrate your successes, you might want to make sure that you celebrate the small successes along the way, because it's really important to see how the person has grown. And my final piece of advice to you is to be open to the possibilities. Keep in mind that this is a growing process for the mentee. Hopefully, it's also going to be a growing process for you. I want to applaud you for being willing to mentor some of our new teachers coming in, because without support, they're not going to be the best people they could be. Remember that everybody has something that they can contribute, and help them build from their strengths. I want to give a final thank you to Washington and Lee for helping to facilitate this webinar today. And I'm going to get everybody's emails from Bettina so that I can make sure that you have access to the folder that I have for the research and preparation for today. And just congratulations on the work that you're doing, and keep it up. Be aware that there are several slides with references, and you're free to explore those. I look forward to working with you again at the next FLAVA, and continue the good work that you're doing. Thank you so much.